for all the major stories from the U.S., Errol Morkoc joins us now from California. Good to have you join us this weekend, Errol. First, we begin with Trump reaching out to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali to open talks about a potential new nuclear deal, according to U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. But Khamenei has rejected Trump's approach, calling the U.S. a bully. Also, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says talks are impossible unless Washington changes its pressure policies. What is your reaction to this?
I would say at first glance, I'm not surprised, but I am a little bit disappointed, and I'll tell you why. The reason is that Iran realizes that they have a 4-year window of opportunity here with a one-term U.S. president. If they ever wanted to find a peace deal, some sort of reintegration, this is going to be the administration that has the political capital to do it, because any other politician, elected Republican or Democrat after this, is going to have to deal with re-election cycles. Donald Trump has already played all of his cards in terms of the U.S. political cycle. So they're missing a golden window. On top of that, you saw Mr. Trump or President Trump, he ratcheted up the zero tolerance, full pressure plan on Iran, effectively saying you are going to be able to sell barrels of oil to the entire world, or you're going to sit down and negotiate with us. That's why they're calling him a bully. And, that maybe is a strongman tactic, but it's a strongman tactic to come to a negotiating table. You see a huge amount of change in the Levant. You see the restructuring of Gaza with Arab allies coming in. And many of these Arab allies, whether they be the Turkish or the Saudis or half of the Gulf states, are enemies of Iran in great part. And now you have the reconstitution of Syria under, who knows what's going to happen there. So I think Iran is missing the point. They're missing the clear window of opportunity they have to work with an administration that is willing to reintegrate Persia into the greater world markets. And it's an amazing country with an amazing history, an amazing culture. And America is not without fault in how the history of Iran has gone in the last 100 years. Certainly, we've made mistakes, and we can acknowledge that. But if they're not willing to come to the table and have a discussion with us, I fear that President Trump will ratchet up the pressure until Iran has no choice. And I think it's better to come to a negotiation table when you still have cards to play, which Iran still does. So I hope they reconsider, but obviously they have domestic politics to play too. They can't be seen as being weak to the Americans. But I just want to stress this is the best 4 years they have. And if they don't do it, Donald Trump can do carrot or he can do stick. And we would much prefer to do carrot.
Now, there's also a part to what you've talked about. That's the 2018 decision to withdraw the U.S. from the Joint Comprehensive Plan for Action, a 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran. It seems like some of these, world leaders, the body language they get from Trump is he makes these comments. It doesn't sound like negotiation to them. It's like this is this. If you don't go by this rule, then they see it as a bully. Is it an issue of communication? What's with the issue here?
I think that they're right to feel that they're being bullied, and Donald Trump is bullying them. Absolutely, he's bullying them. He's bullying them the same way he did when he canceled the nuclear agreement that we effectively had. That was a slow burn plan for them to get a nuclear bomb. This is a country that has mass rallies every month saying death to America, death to Israel, talking about wiping us off the face of the map. Okay, so it's not exactly a country that has built any goodwill, and a country that we're willing to allow to get the nuclear bomb in the capacity they do. And also, if you think about the greater geopolitical ramifications, Saudi Arabia has already said they have arrangements that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, they will have one they've already purchased from an Islamic country that has nuclear weapons. So if you're trying to have non-proliferation, the last thing you want to do is have Iran get a missile, because now the surrounding area will have to get a missile. And if that takes a bully, if that takes somebody who's not going to come in and hum and haw like Blinken and or whatever some of the old Secretary of States we had, we want actual change, and that change is going to start with American force and American pressure to bring that change. If they want to call it bullying, that's fine. If it brings about peace, if it brings about an end to this nonstop feud, then we'll take the criticism and we'll take the peace along with it.
And touching on each of the top stories, let's move now to U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff. He said that the United States is hopeful for the meeting in Saudi Arabia today. Anything to look forward to at that meeting, talking about the Ukraine, the Russia issue?
Yes, I think it's really important for us to at least get a better reaction from the Russian delegation and especially President Putin. As you're, I'm sure, aware, the last time they gave us our word on a few things and explicitly broke that the next day. And a lot of that had to do with domestic politics in the same sense that Putin can't be seen as at the same level of Zelensky. So when they told Zelensky to stop and he stopped, they told Putin to stop. If he had stopped also, it would put the Americans in a superior position. So by doing what he did, he kept I, I don't want to be too technical, but the geopolitical sort of balance in check. But this meeting now, we really need to get some guarantees. We need to make sure that the Ukrainian troops, whoever are left in Kursk, are going to be able to withdraw without being killed or captured. And we would like to see at least a firm commitment to ending strikes on any energy facilities or any infrastructure, because frankly, it's all going to have to be rebuilt. And everything that the Russians are bombing in Ukraine is going to be rebuilt by Americans. So, I mean, American firms effectively and Western firms that are going to come in and JV with Ukrainian firms. So, in some ways, Vladimir Putin is boosting the economic rehabilitation of Ukraine in a way that's deleterious to the current situation and only helps us, his adversary, in the long run. So we hope that they see some pragmatism, and we also hope that they perhaps commit to greater ceasefires. Both sides have continued to launch drones, and a lot of times you have, maybe deregulated forces that are out there doing these kind of things, and we want to see the centralized leadership in Kyiv and in Moscow crack down on any rogue actors or rogue generals who are still pushing the line. Because right now it's a really tense situation, and our only objective is to stop the war. When you get to a point of stalemate in a war of attrition, in a trench warfare with 800 miles of trenches like World War One, somebody needs to pull the plug on it, and we're really hopeful that in Riyadh today we can start that process.
When it comes to the issue of this peace talks, a lot of critics have said the way that Trump has handled the issue with Zelensky is quite different from Putin. And as a matter of fact, lots are saying it seems like Putin has something on Trump. I want your reaction on this. I mean, this is one of the questions we've been meaning to ask. As a Republican spokesman, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think Putin does have something. He has nuclear weapons. He has the largest standing army in the world behind the Chinese and a larger standing army than all of Europe combined. He's been willing to throw 500,000 soldiers to their death. So that's what he has. He actually has cards to negotiate. Whereas Zelensky has American dollars, American equipment, and we are nonstop funding and supporting him in his righteous and genuine quest to protect his country an invader who's a barbaric invader who's come and captured children and attacked their country. But the fact of the matter is, Russia is the senior partner. Russia is world dominant power with fifth generation fighter jets and hypersonic missiles, nuclear submarines ringing the entire globe. And Ukraine is a basically debtor country that is dependent on our money to continue fighting a perpetual war. So they absolutely are being treated differently. And the reason is because Russia has cards to play. Russia has cards to play, especially economically. When you look at grain, when you look at aluminium, especially the second largest supplier of aluminium is Russia. By these sanctions, we've pushed them right into the seat of Moscow, and now, I'm sorry, Beijing. And Beijing now has a lot more say. So we're pushing Beijing and Moscow together, and that's not a good idea. So I think Donald Trump is pragmatic of the multipolar world order that Marco Rubio has said that we are now entering into. You have Chinese sphere, you have Russian sphere, you have the American sphere, and then you have a lot of microspheres around the world. And because of this, I think that the different treatment is also based on the different level of country that we're dealing with. If you want to have detente with Vladimir Putin and with Russia, you're going to have to treat him with a different level of respect than President Zelensky, with all due respect, who has not conducted himself in a way that the Republican Party feels confident in his leadership.
Now, just briefly, still on the Ukraine-Russian issue, talking about the EU now, starting with Keir Starmer. According to him, he has a plan, but Steve Witkoff said the idea was based on a simplistic notion of the UK minister and the European leaders thinking that what Winston Churchill would say, we have all got to be like, Winston Churchill. What role, and does this mean that the EU leaders, from your perspective now, have no role to play in this, Ukraine-Russia talks?
I think that they abrogated their role to some degree. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen the kind of hilarious and sad data that came out that the European states have funded Russia with oil money greater than they've funded Ukraine. At the end of the day, the European proposal is basically some sort of peacekeeping force, something that we've seen in places in South Asia and places in Africa that haven't done well and haven't been a good example of Western guidelines. And on top of that, if you look at the British military, the entire British military, no offense, can fit into Wembley Stadium. Okay, so there's like 71,000 people in the military. It's not, what are you going to take half of your military and put them in Ukraine, France, put them in Ukraine, take all these. I mean, if you want to do that, if the Europeans want to get together an expeditionary force, take their 800, 900 billion euros and actually go and park it in Ukraine, go ahead. But our proposal is much more logical, which is to flood the place with American contractors and American companies and American workers and have an economic détente. I think that pressing NATO countries, especially militarily, even if they're going to be under a white helmet banner, up against the border of Russia is exactly the problem we have today. The point was that we were going to have a buffer zone between NATO and the Warsaw Pact and or former Warsaw Pact. And in that buffer zone was to ensure that if there was a border skirmish, it didn't invoke Article 13 and start World War III, which has been the big fear. So the Europeans, for the last 20 years, they've abrogated their position in the world. They sort of think they have some sort of privilege because they live in apartments and drive tiny cars. I have no idea what they've done with their economy, but their economy in 20 years ago, we were even. Now our GDP is double their economy. People with good jobs in America, with good jobs in Europe, make like a joke amount of money to Americans. So Europe has collapsed financially and they've collapsed militarily. And if they want to re-engage with that, it looks like they do. You see the leadership from Macron and the idea that they're going to pump a lot of money and rebuild maybe a European alliance. That would be great because then America can finally extract itself from a continent that we have given charity to for 75 years for multiple wars that these people have started that almost destroyed the world. We have our own problems. We would like to go home, and we would love to see Europe step up and change course and become the leaders of that hemisphere that they need to be because it can't be our job anymore, especially our taxpayers.
Real quickly, let's take you on the South African Ibrahim Rosso, the South African ambassador who was expelled from the United States in a row with President Donald Trump's government. He's arrived in Cape Town. He says he regrets nothing. One wonders, I mean, after this back and forth with the U.S. ambassador, well, former now, who's been expelled from the U.S., how the Trump administration intends to, deal with diplomacy when it comes to Africa. There are 43 countries recently that we saw that, were on a red list in the U.S. Thankfully, Nigeria isn't there. But then how do you explain, the diplomacy with Africa in general? They're middle income countries, low countries, and also with this particular impact it's going to have with, severing ties with other African countries going forward.
Well, let's touch on the ambassador first because that one's the sort of the smoking gun in the room. This gentleman, for all his intentions or whatever he is in the world, he did openly declare the Make America Great Again movement, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, people like myself, as effectively white supremacists. And he said that this is a white supremacist movement. Well, from 2012 until 2022, we've given $6 billion of American taxpayer dollars to South Africa. That's during the first Trump presidency, by the way. So the idea that we're going to accept an ambassador who comes to our country and calls us all racists is absolutely asinine. I mean, I've done quite a lot of business around the world, and I've done business in South Africa, and frankly, South Africa needs America. If America doesn't exactly need South Africa, we're happy to be a good ally and be a good friend, especially for global trade and the importance of peace. But if you're going to send an ambassador who calls us these kind of deleterious, awful, incorrect names, we're going to send that ambassador back. And definitely, I don't think that the situation in South Africa is indicative of the rest of Africa. And in South Africa, you see the chants of kill the Boer, kill the farmer. They're viral all over the internet. And when then contrast that with what recently came out in Uganda, where the president came out and invited the Americans to come and be a bigger part of these initiatives. And you're seeing that as America comes back onto the world stage to maybe supplement the role China has played in Africa, as you know, in Namibia, most of the mining is controlled by Chinese companies. I'm in Namibia a couple times, and I'm meeting Chinese guys with Namibian passports. It's a very interesting situation. So it's become a globalized system, and the idea that somebody can castigate our president and our movement and call us white supremacists and then expect to be welcomed in our country as an ambassador, I mean, it's beyond the pale. We hope that South Africa comes to its senses, but so far it's been on a pretty steady economic decline. They can't keep the power on. It's not a good look for them right now. And I think if I was them, I would do the same thing I was saying about Iran. Wow, you have this president for 4 years. You have a guy who's willing to make changes, who make deals, and instead you insult him and call him a white supremacist, a man who's done nothing but in his first term continue the incredible billions of dollars of aid. I think this just in the last 2023, we gave $680 million. So if we're a white supremacist country that hates Africans, then why are we sending them all this money? It's a lie, and it's not the kind of people we want to work with. We want to work with allies in the region. We want to work with new up and coming emerging markets. That's exactly the kind of thing that this new American century can possibly bring about for the world. But we certainly can't deal with people who are going to be so rude. And I think being that rude and impolite, while it might play well at home for his fans, history will forget this man because nobody knows who he was. And hopefully, South Africa will send us a qualified ambassador who shows respect to the United States and to its voters.
Errol Morkoc for joining us on Arise America. Errol joins us from California there.